Started. I guess so.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's program. We'll just take a moment and let everyone log on. We always love to know where you're zooming in from. So if you want to put a message in the chat, we'd love to hear from you.
Every once in a while, move that up so people can see your mending on.
Good afternoon. Welcome to today's program. If you're just logging on, we'll get started shortly. We always want to give everyone a moment to log on. We're always interested where people are zooming in from. So send a message in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks to those of you who have already done that. We're just going to give it a couple of more minutes. If you're just logging on, I want to welcome you to today's program. Give it another minute for everyone to log on. Send us a message in the chat if you want to say hello or let us know where you're zooming in from. I think we'll get started. I want to be mindful of everyone's time today. I want to wish everyone a good afternoon. My name is Judy Margles. I am the director at the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education. We're really thrilled to be live at the museum today for a program with artist Bonnie Meltzer, who's ably accompanied by her sewing assistant, Wendy Rust. We're also accompanied by Rachel Seiger, who's the program manager at the Denver Jewish Community Center, and Eli West, who's a fiber artist and the event producer of Portland Textile Month. All of our virtual programming at the museum, including today's event, recordings of past events, we offer everything without charge. We're always grateful for any donation you might be able to make to support our work, the work of the Denver Jewish Community Center, or the work of Portland Textile Month. You'll find information about our upcoming programming, membership opportunities, or donating on our website. I also want to invite everyone to visit the museum. In addition to Mending the Social Fabric, the subject of today's program, we have 3 core exhibitions about the Holocaust, discrimination and resistance in Oregon, and the Oregon Jewish experience. We also have another special exhibition about Lawrence Halpern and his Portland Fountains that continues through late October. October is also Portland Textile Month. There are numerous virtual and in-person events going on, which can be found on their website or social media. All of that we're going to be posting in the chat. And there's really good news for anyone in Portland. Bonnie, our artist, is going to be at the museum between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. this coming Saturday and Sunday, taking part in Portland Open Studios, where her work has been named an artist destination. At our museum, the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education, our mission is to explore the legacy of the Jewish experience in Oregon, teach the universal lessons of the Holocaust, and provide opportunities for intercultural conversation. We challenge our visitors to resist indifference and discrimination and to envision a just and inclusive world. And it was really this synchronicity with our mission that drew us to Bonnie's work. As many of you might know, Mending the Social Fabric was originally scheduled to open at the museum in October of 2020. At that time, we were excited by the scope of the work and Bonnie's attention to contemporary issues of immigration, citizen action, and voting rights. Postponing the exhibit obviously because of the pandemic, spurred Bonnie to rethink the work in light of the dual pandemics, if you will, these dual pandemics we've been facing of COVID and racial injustice. And the motif of repairing the world, tikkun olam, and the addition of safety nets has enriched the work in innumerable ways. I'd be really remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the dozens of people who contributed their sewing skills to the project. In the midst of a pandemic, when so many of us have been feeling the effects of month-long isolation, mending the social fabric is a testament to our ability to work together and create something good, even in adverse circumstances. So I'm really delighted to be joined today with Bonnie from within her installation at the museum. She'll be in conversation with Wendy Rust, Rachel Seiger, and Eli West. Rachel Seiger is the program manager at the Denver Jewish Community Center, which hosts a robust online program with Jewish artists called Neustadt Jam Festival. Eli West produces Portland Textile Month, which is hosting events and exhibitions all across Portland. We really want to hear from you and your questions, so be sure to put them in the Q&A. We'll ask that you don't put them in the chat, but in the Q&A, just to make it streamlined for those monitoring the Q&A. And on that note, please join me in welcoming Bonnie, Wendy, Rachel, and Eli.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy that the Portland, Oregon Jewish Museum said, yes, we think this is a great idea, and do it in our space. It was a great idea for me back when I was just focusing on elections, and it is even a more exciting idea. But the core of this piece is about action. I have two quotes. Many of the quotes which are on the parachute here, embroidered onto beautiful antique handkerchiefs. If democracy is hanging by a thread, pick up a needle and darn it back in. Vote, volunteer, donate. That is the core of this exhibit. And another one is, one stitch at a time, all of you can mend the social fabric. And I want to elaborate on that a little bit. So many of us look at the world and we see the problems that are just giganto. And we say, what can I do? Well, I'm urging you in this environment, this installation is urging you, do what you can, even if it's one stitch, one small thing. If you do nothing, nothing gets solved. If you do a small thing, then there's a possibility that something actually gets fixed. Annie Lamont, a writer, says, if you want to count birds, how do you do it? One bird at a time. And this is one stitch at a time. Back in the pre-pandemic days, this was going to be about the elections. And I kept hearing the social fabric, it's unraveling. I couldn't turn on the television, the radio, or read something that wasn't alluding to the fabric of society. And just so you know, and this is also embroidered, this was a long one, I needed a big hanky, to what is the social fabric? The social fabric is a metaphor of how well the community members interact among themselves. If you consider all the individual members as threads, the social fabric is made by having those members interact, thus weaving the threads together. The tighter the weave, the more frequently and positively the members interact with each other, the stronger the fabric. And that's from a site to help new English speakers learn the language. It's a whole site about the idioms. And it's a really important idiom. We all know fabric. Fabric is part of our everyday lives. We wear clothes. We sleep in beds with linens and blankets and fluffy pillows. And we even have woven, yesterday when at a talk, I said, how many of you wove in those little potholder looms when you were kids? Kids are still doing it. We know that it's under, over. Then on the next row, it's the other way, that interlocking. It is used, the textile metaphors are so ingrained in our language that I even heard a funny one the other day when I was watching an architecture program. And the person who was presenting said, stone is the very fabric of architecture. And that made me laugh because textiles is considered the basis for everything, the interconnection for everything. When you do a big project like this, you have to have rules, or I had to have rules because it could have been unmanageable. And it also, there was now people who are sewing on it. And so I had to have rules so it would still become cohesive whole. The first rule was that all the text on the hankies, and I lied and said there were 75 when I actually counted, there were only 60 something. I decided that every quote about the social fabric had to have a textile mention. It had to have something to do with textiles. I also wrote a lot of the things. Wherever there is a quote, I have credited it and asked permission of people who are living. And I want to read to you one of the quotes that I wrote. And it was the very first one I wrote when elections was part of it. Elections are the warp threads. Voters are the weft threads making the fabric of democracy. You can have elections, and if nobody votes, you don't have democracy. So from that, people sent me quotes. I looked on the internet. I wrote things. I thought about things. I had to say, this is about the mending. This isn't about fetching. This isn't about complaining. This isn't about the unraveling. This is about the mending. And that was not as easy as it sounded. I asked people for quotes. I asked people to write things, and sometimes they were so negative. I thought, no, this is about the mending. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. I already did a whole show on the unraveling of the social fabric, and that was in 2018. I was working on these ideas for these two things tangentially. Then I limited the colors to red, white, blue, and the all-important purple. So you know why I picked purple is because I love it. It is my favorite color. I wear it a lot. But it's also much more important. It's the mixing of red and blue makes purple. We even talk about purple states, but it is also the color of the suffragettes, which is quite lovely. There's so many components of this. I just want to go through a little bit about what they are. The first is this giant humongous parachute. And I chose a parachute, number one, because it came to me out of the sky, so to speak. But it is a symbol of safety. And I chose, Wendy and I had many, many conversations about having it on a rigid structure, her building something, have it over a tent. And then I decided we really like the softness of the parachute, and symbolically, that parachute is ready for action. It is insurance. And I like that double meaning. It is the safety when it's actually in play, but it's the insurance waiting to be used. I actually saw a joke on Facebook yesterday, which was there was a little picture of people in parachutes, and then there was somebody dropping like a stone, and it was a demonstration against parachutes. I thought that was a little amusing. But I have the parachute, I have the hankies, but the most important part, to emphasize that everybody has to mend, where these holes, yeah, I can go back here. There are actually holes in the fabric. Let's see if you can see, I'll stick my hand in here, you'll be able to see it better. There's a hole in the social fabric. And people for the last weekend came here and they mended the holes. They either just used thread and wound around the holes, or they used patches. And so I want to talk with Wendy, who's diligently sewing. And did I catch you at exactly the wrong minute?
I have it not.
Oh no.
Imagine that.
Well, knots are important. They keep things still. I'll talk a little bit about, or you can just show what you're doing here.
Okay.
I have decided, I've decided that I would give as little instruction as possible. My first inclination was to give a stitch of the day, or to be more teacher, once a teacher, always a teacher, once a person who's a little bit of a control freak, to want to control more. But I decided that, and especially while watching the people, they were so into it, and some people took 5 or 6 colored pieces of fabric and put them together, and it became symbolically more interesting because it shows there's more than one way to mend something. There's more than one way to fix something. And I think that's how we get hung up. We think there's one way, that way doesn't work. We think, we have to do the whole project. We don't realize that that one little way is on the path to fixing things. So do you want to hold up what you're doing? I don't know if they can see it all the way back there.
Probably not.
This kind of stitching that we're doing is a Japanese stitching called visible mending. And it's a little different than what my mother did. If she mended something, you couldn't see those stitches. But this mending, you make the fabric actually stronger by doing stitch over stitch over stitch, and you make an embellished surface. In Japan, they also do that with pottery. If there's a crack in a pot, instead of throwing it out or fixing it in some other way that it's restored to its original, they fill it with gold. So that crack is there and very visible. So people like the idea that they don't have to be so precious and that they can mend in their own style and think about it in their own way. You probably can see these fabrics on the back wall. I'm kind of pointing there. Those are fabrics from all over the world. And it was an interesting project. Wendy also helped me on that. Before the pandemic, people came to my studio 5 at a time, 6 at a time, up to 10 at a time. And they gathered these fabrics from around the world, and they made these little pockets or these little flags, and I strung them together later this summer. And the idea behind it came when I was listening to the radio. It's a wonderful thing to do while you're sewing. You have your own little rhythm. I can't listen to music because I either have to sew too fast or sew too slow. I listen to the radio, I listen to books. And in November 2019, all I heard was, immigrants are bad people. Immigrants come from horrible countries. Immigrants steal. They are just disgusting people. Wow, I come from an immigrant family. My parents were both immigrants. They're nice people. So I decided I would make this part of this environment, part of this. But it was to be on this parachute. This parachute, which is 20 feet wide, I thought would have plenty of room to put these beautiful rows of fabric. But once you hang it in a room and begin to let it drape, I didn't have as much room and it didn't look as well. So I said, there's a back wall, 18 feet wide. I can make rows of this and put it on. And I needed a lot of fabric. I bought fabric, I looked in my collection, people sent me fabric. Somebody from Poland sent me fabric. There would be drop-bys of fabric on my porch, but they're from all over the world. Some of them are old. One fabric is an Athabascan beadwork that's about over 100 years old that comes from a native family that I know. And some are kind of funny, like I have the dress I was wearing when I met my husband. It's a little, we met on Valentine's Day and it has little Valentine's Day. Wendy came and helped me sew. Other people came and helped me sew. And then we strung them together and fit them on this wall, this lovely backdrop. Every piece has a story. So if you come into the museum, you can look at the pieces. If I'm here, I'll tell you some of the stories. I wanted to encourage people to read the text that's also on there. I've never really been one who uses text in my work, but this project called out for it in so many different ways. And I wanted people to understand this process about who the people of America, of the United States of America are. And it started with, and again, using that word, that connection to fiber, is immigrants are a golden thread woven through the American tapestry or into the American tapestry. I wanted to expand on that to include others, not just immigrants. And our vice president has given us a wonderful quote, and I am going to say it. We have the right to be recognized as American, not as the other, not as them, but as us. And if you look at the whole thing with the immigrants are a golden thread, and then I added that Black lives are a golden thread, and Indigenous people are a golden thread. It has the whole scope of this beautiful woven tapestry that makes the American people. The central idea is to include everybody. Everybody is an American. And I'm hoping that those pieces of fabric symbolize that. There's also two other components of this. I'm going to just get up for a moment and get out of view. If you can see in the back, there's a map. I'll sit down again. That is our giant pin cushion. How many of you like to thread needles? Nobody. Even before the pandemic, I had decided when a friend of mine said, "I'll come, but I'm not threading any damn needles." And so I said, okay, I'll thread all the needles. Actually, I had help from my friend Bob Geddes, and he threaded needles for a whole afternoon. It was quite fun. They're on there, ready to be used. And then the pandemic came. And all of you know, I will ask you, Wendy, what is the first thing that people do when they thread a needle? They suck the thread. They think it's going to make it come to a point. It does not. So I thought, wow, I was ahead of my time. I knew that people shouldn't be putting the thread in their mouths in a public piece. But the pin cushion, and we also have a needle, which unfortunately you can't see. It is a giant needle that comes across, that's on the wall, and it's being threaded by the support structure that comes across the ceiling and ends up in this needle. Wendy, again, I said, oh, I need a needle. I guess I have to make one. She said, no, I'll make one. And so she made this beautiful needle out of a broom handle. I really am so overwhelmed at this project. It had a life of its own. It was one of those things that during a pandemic, I had to stay home to make this work. So it was kind of a good thing that I had something wonderful to work on. I'm just thrilled. It was really great fun to work on it. I was thrilled at all the people who helped me do this, sewers, fabric people, people who donated to it. But I want to leave you with some thoughts before we have the questions. First of all, I want to thank the Jewish Museum. I want to thank the Denver Jewish Community Center. I want to thank Textile Month for widening the community that this project encompasses. But I want to read you two things. This is a quote by Sonia Renee Taylor, who is a young Black woman who is very thoughtful about all of these issues. We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. We should not long to return. My friends, we have been given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. I think that really says it all, because at the beginning of the pandemic, there were people who said, let's go back. We have this great opportunity to change the things that need to be changed. And I'm not a congressperson, I have no real power, but through my artwork, I can spread that idea. And the last two quotes are, your justice is my justice. Unless we all have justice, none of us has justice. And that was Cory Booker. And I'm from Irvington, New Jersey, which is right next door to Newark. So I was very proud to include him. I actually heard that he was on Stephen Colbert, even on a comedy show where you see serious work. And the last one, that is something I wrote. The first handkerchief I actually did in testing all of these things was be kind most days. You might not be able to do it every day. Now that doesn't mean you're mean on those other days. It means you give yourself a break. You might be grouchy. You might just not feel like it. But if you're kind most days, you can do it. I think we're going to have questions now.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And so good to see everyone virtually, at least. So yeah, thank you so much for shedding light on your work and the social justice elements in your piece. I'd love to for us to learn a bit more about the story of this piece and how it's evolved from where you first originally found it, and how you're connected to it individually and communally.
Well, I got the idea on January 20th, 2017, of when I kept hearing social fabric, social fabric, social fabric. I mean, there were sometimes people made speeches and they used the word social fabric 3 or 4 times. Now, I'm a fabric artist. I haven't done much sewing, so to speak. I'm much more a crochet artist with big 3-dimensional pieces. But I kept hearing it. I said, I have to use this. I have to use it. I mean, it was like one of those ideas that just flew out of your head. And I started to keep a notebook. I started to start listening for those quotes. And I actually have a textile reference database of quotes and things that I have written. And unfortunately, there were about 50 of them I never got to use, but there are other work. I still have other artworks in my head and in my hands. While I was working on the Unraveling show, mostly about environmental unraveling, because so many environmental laws were thrown out the window in 2017. I began thinking of the mending idea. That was one of the early things. I would write a list, I want to do on water, I want to do something on air, I want to do something on this, I want to do something about the mending. But I thought, how do I do that? Well, I had lots of ideas, none of them really worked. And then a friend, Kendra Crick, called me up and said, my father-in-law has a giant parachute in his barn and they're getting ready to move it. It came with the house. It was out in the country in New York State. Do you want it? She said, I already told him you wanted it. So it came. It came in this box. It hadn't been opened for probably since 1945. It has a date on it, which is 1943, October. And isn't it wonderful that this is October? October 1943 was when it was made. So I have when it was made, where it was made, the number of it is. So I have all of that. And it solved two problems for me because it had a perimeter and I could put embroidery hoops to hold everything still so people could stitch. And then I had this other canvas and it was already a symbol of safety, which I mentioned before. I then had to think, oh my God, how are we going to hang this? But I'm getting ahead of myself because as I was working on it and coming up with ideas and doing samples, people said, where are you going to hang this? And I had to say, the Jewish Museum, except they don't know it. I'm kind of like that. I have a list of other museums where I want this to go next, but that's another story. So I called up Judy and I said, I have this idea. You're gonna either love it, love it, love it, or you're gonna say, it's very nice, but it's not for us. And she said, yes. Well, thank you, Judy, for saying yes. I had to write a proposal and send pictures. I have a parachute collection. I don't know why. I came on the train from another neighborhood with my big IKEA bag filled with a mere 10-foot wide parachute rather than this one, which was 20 feet wide, with a sample of what I thought it was going to look like, which was vote. It had letters that said vote. It said all kinds of other things, mostly about voting and elections. And these samples of what the people could do. And she said, I love this idea. We both like this idea because of the healing capacity. And more than ever after people being locked in their houses, especially people who live in apartments. I'm so lucky I live in a house with a big backyard and a separate studio. Sitting together, and I watched this weekend and at the opening. People were connected to each other. They were asking each other. They were showing each other. People came in families. My own cousins are coming on tomorrow. One is coming from New York. One is coming from Texas. They're sisters. And so there's a little family reunion thing happening. I just love that whole, just love that whole idea. And I'm hoping that people will send me an email and we can schedule short, series of 5 groups, people at a time to come and mend. There's so many changes that have happened. Wendy and I spent probably 6 days trying to figure out how to hang this, what shape it would be in. I have to thank the museum for letting me come here while it was closed. This room is bigger than my studio. So when the museum opened again and I had to bring it back home to finish working on it, it was a little odd. My ceiling goes like this, so I didn't have a place to hang it, except by some odd jerry-rigged methods. So is that, I could go on forever, so you have to stop me and interrupt.
Well, I was wondering, so I mean, this project is so successful, and I think it aligns with the JCC's mission and with Portland Textile Month's mission, and as well with the Jewish museums. But I was wondering, our theme this year for Portland Textile Month is new traditions. And as you were working on this and knowing you were involved with Portland Textile Month, how do you see new traditions either incorporated in this body of work or within your own practice?
Well, I guess my whole art life has been with new traditions. I was a pioneer in crocheted sculpture, and if you have any of those books from the 70s, you will see some very funny things. I mean, crochet evolved in the 70s as a sculptural medium, but not that we could always exhibit it any place, but that's a whole other story. But I saw these textile arts, and the 70s were a great, exciting time for seeing the new tradition. So I'm looking at a longer look. You know, there are other people who have made art out of parachutes, and mending is hot. Who knew that mending was a hot subject when I started this? I didn't know, but I started doing searches on mending, and you know, there are mending groups. I actually, last year in Textile Month, I took a mending class. And I also didn't know that embroidering on handkerchiefs was anything, but people are looking to use materials. We don't always have to go out and buy, you know, $500 worth of pristine fabric to work on. So there's lots and lots of people. I was in Washington, DC in 2019 and saw quite a bit of work that was done on handkerchiefs. And it was really funny because I had just gotten my little package of handkerchiefs. So it's important to me that people see new ways of using old tools. And when I teach, I try to get people to invent and find their voice.
I love those themes of upcycling and encouraging that in our art and also just in our everyday lives. I also really love this theme of safety, especially during a time where in the pandemic, so many of us felt unsafe on so many different levels, and reevaluating what our boundaries were and all those sorts of things. And taking a parachute that came from World War II era and the elements that it did not represent likely, which was, of course, saving people, right? Parachutes, but during a war-torn global kind of environment. And I think it's really fascinating and wonderful to see how the story of a parachute can render such inspiration. And it also kind of reminds me of the question and the comments about what you've learned about yourself and your process during this time. And I know you were talking a bit about letting go of controlling maybe some elements of the piece and such. And so I'd love to hear a bit more about that and yeah, what you've learned about yourself or the therapeutic process of working.
I want to tell two stories about parachute. One is that we're doing this Japanese technique, and someone who shall remain nameless was irate that I was using a World War II parachute and then teaching Japanese stitchery. I thought it was a perfect example on how we mend. that countries can mend, that United States of America and Japan are now good friends, that we've mended those fences, even though 75 years ago we were enemies. And I really like that idea. One of the things that I've learned the most in this is that I can push myself at my age, and I'm in my mid 70s, that I can push myself to the end of my comfort zone. And I'm not going to tell you which side because it depended which day you got me. I did have a lot of help, but essentially this is my work that I worked on almost every day for 2 years. I could push myself to the endurance. I felt that if you have an idea, you look for the best possible materials to do it. And with the internet, if you don't know how to do something, you can find out. There's so much research available. And I found out that I love to do, well, I knew this before, I love to do research.
Could you talk a little bit more about the research that you were doing and what you found yourself being drawn to during that time? Was it mainly like looking for textile related metaphors, or?
It was mostly textile related metaphors, but you know, you could look for textiles, you could look for fiber, look for fiber and you get brand. I love the internet. I knew about the internet a really long time ago, and even its precursor, HyperCard, which is a way of thinking that has given credibility for the way I think. I am a nonlinear thinker, and that's what the internet is. You think about, you do a search for something, and for instance, sisters, and you could get a city in Oregon, you could get a nun, or you could get a sibling. And you can get way off. And so sometimes I did get way off looking for those things. I would just sit and look up things. And then because I'm one of those people who likes Facebook, I would put up queries on Facebook. And one of those is a woman said, oh, my friend, Kim Stafford, is a poet, and his father wrote a wonderful poem about the thread of life. And he also wrote a line about a parachute. Are you near that, Wendy? Are you near the baby dress with the parachute line? Could you possibly read that? Oops, and fall on Nationwide. It's on the bottom of the baby dress.
It's on the, there it is. Okay. I have woven a parachute out of everything broken.
And here it is. It's almost like it brings it. I have woven a parachute out of everything broken. And that's a part of a William Stafford poem. But because I put it out on Facebook, people said, oh, here's something that you could use. So I loved having that communication. I'm really a very social person. And so it was really hard for me to be locked up. I loved having those sewing bees, and I really miss them. We had some of them this summer. People did the testing. There was a lot of testing I had to do. Do you like the hole better than the rip? Do you like a double thread or a single thread? And we would do those in my backyard, and there were, maybe 10 people who came and helped me with that.
Speaking of having helpers, we have a question from the audience, which is, would you walk us through what happens in a mending bee?
Okay. Well, do you want to say? No. Well, you get one of these little stools that I'm sitting on. You find a place, you pick it up, you pick up a needle. I give you a few directions. The directions are, keep it within the, we have a basket of fabrics. Is that around, the basket of fabrics? It is. I have it. Good. Could I have it?
Working on it. There it is.
Oh. We didn't want anybody to trip on this while it was going on. Thank you. So we have a basket of fabrics, just fabrics, 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 little pieces, beautiful little pieces of fabric. Some nice little lace. And people go up to a place. I'm gonna reach here. I see a hole. I don't know if you can see it here. I'm in an awkward position. They put the lace on here and then they begin to sew. And one of the rules is you don't have the lace coming out. I wanted to keep the design element of the circle. I'm allowed to be a little bit picky. And the more stitches you do, the more secure it is. Those are the rules. And that you tie a little knot at the end. And then we have scissors that's on a long cord. It's tied under the leg of this platform. And we have a little, let's see if I put it where I can put it so you can see. It's a little old sweater that's been felted. And that's when you finish your needle, you finish your thread, you put your old needle in here. If you need a new needle and you want to embroider more, you go get another one. And on Sunday, there were people who used maybe 10 needles. Guess what I'm going to be doing tonight? I'm going to be threading needles for the next workshop. So come, try it. It's really fun. You could come for a little bit or a long time. We're limiting it to kind of 5 people sewing at a time. But there's kind of 5 facets to this. The parachute, the way it's hung, kind of makes pages of a book, or I call them little rooms. There's one for mending, there's one for the safety net, there's one for justice, there's one for voting, and then there's one just kind of life in general.
Beautiful. On that also, I'm curious about the other pieces that are hanging up around the wall. Can you speak a little bit about that display and what those works are?
Okay, a couple of, well, when we were doing this, and once my friend said, I'm not threading any needles, then I had to figure out what the delivery system, everything in this project, oh my God, I had to think so much. I mean, everything had to have a solution that was for myself, but also for people who were coming. So I wanted to make a big pin cushion. And a friend of mine last year gave me a little felted pin cushion. And I had the idea that I would, actually it was 2 years ago. Time guys go so fast during a pandemic and so slow. Well, 2 years ago, she gave me a pin cushion that was felted, and I thought, out of an old sweater. And I thought, wow, I'll start collecting wool sweaters, which I put in my washing machine. And I only wanted red, white, and blue. And I knew I was going to make a map of it. So it is a map and a flag. And it is the United States. The implication that I want people to have is the United States is ready to mend. Here are the tools for mending the needle. And so I can put like 75 needles at a time on that. Then again, I'm going to get out of the way and you can kind of get back there. It's about 4 feet wide.
So viewers and your sewing bees interact with the United States to get pins out of there, or is it just your personal pin cushion that's on display?
Oh no, this is these are the pin cushions for the needles.
Beautiful, absolutely.
So it is a marriage of utility and beauty. I want to make a comment about because a lot of the things are very hard to read here because they remind us of things. And there was a man, and I hope he's watching this because I really do want him to come and bring a group of veterans. We talked about it, and I didn't get his name and number. But he started to cry. And it is because it was, he reacted to the things I was saying, and it reminded him of his past when he is a veteran of Vietnam. My goal in making artwork about heavy duty issues is make them as beautiful as you can. So people stick around and look at it. And then they go, oh, it's about that. Because if I make it, and there's a lot of what I call ugly art around, about ugly issues, but people don't stick around to look at them, they run away. I was once at a dance concert, which I was an usher, and they gave us earplugs because they said the music is going to be so loud and so discordant that some people would want to have earplugs. I don't think that helps. I think we need to embrace in a way that people can learn it, can learn the issues. I once did a project about coal, a whole exhibit about coal, and I mean, it was really beautiful, and people were going, oh, which is, as an artist, that was really exciting. And I want people to have that aha moment here as well. Are there any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, it looks like we have one from Colleen. Are the fabrics hanging on the wall labeled with where they are from, and or
you're not the only person. I have to tell you, I wish I had. Maybe I'll do it. Where they came from, how they came to me. Everybody who sees this show says, "Oh, you need to write a book. You need to put your database online." I do. I actually slept 7 hours last night. I thought that was pretty good.
I have a comment on that.
Okay.
If you come to the show, Bonnie will tell you all about the fabrics, and I've listened to her, and she talks like each one is a dear friend. It's really quite fun.
And the docents yesterday got an earful as well. And Wendy, you're going to be here a couple of more times, I bet. So some of them you could guess, but for instance, my cousin who's coming from New York, I was in New York in 2019, just weeks before I started actually sewing on this project. And she said, "I'm not going to museums with you today." And I thought, oh my God, I've worn out my welcome by being a museum junkie. She says, "Oh, no, I'm going to my storage locker." She'd rather go to her storage locker than spend the day with me? Okay, well, she didn't. She went and got a sari that's been in that storage locker for 25 years. And one of the big, beautiful gold bands, the gold ribbons, is from Judy's storage locker.
Wonderful. It looks like we have another Bonnie, but she's from California. And she was asking, can you tell us something about the flag that sits below the parachute? Is there?
It is a piece of fabric that I got from a neighbor. She had used it, I don't know, 30 years ago, and it was in her basement. And I thought it was absolutely a perfect, especially in a white space with a big white. And it is a symbol of what is positive about this country. And one of the handkerchiefs also says that we have to think about the flag in a new way, in a way that weaves everybody into the country, into what is American. And it was sewn. The first flag was sewn, so it has that nice, but we had a problem. We had an 8x8 platform, and the platform was really good. People can sit on it because some people liked sitting on the platform better. But something that's 8x8, that's bigger than a cake size quilt. We thought about a rug. We were going to sew some fabric together, but it needed to have some oomph, so it just wasn't we had some working fabrics that we were using while we were manipulating it. And we chose an 8x8 because number one, it was here. It's the platform for a little stage, but it fits the room. When we were designing this to fit in the room, we also had to take into consideration that there were people who had to move around. There were people who were looking at things. But I think it's quite effective. Wonderful. And it went in the most positive way.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So we're starting to wind down, so we have one more question, and that is from an anonymous viewer who asks, what is the aha moment? What is your end goal here? What is the action or the next step?
Well, what is the next step for me? What is the next step for mending the social fabric? The aha moment is for me right now, I don't want this to be folded up and put in my studio in a giant Tupperware tub, which it does fit in. I would like it to move to other places. I don't know how much in 4 months. The show ends on January 30th. I don't know how much is going to get filled, but I can buy more. I can buy more embroidery hoops. We can fill the whole. We can fill the whole circumference. I like it as a whole set. It can be hung because it's just a big round thing. It can be hung in many ways. It can be hung in different environments. I would like more people to see it in more places. And I like the participatory thing. I mean, I like to be there. So having this, the mending bees is really fits my personality. So if you know of a good place.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. It looks like there's some more questions coming in, but we do have to be considerate of everybody's time. So I think we're going to start wrapping it up. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for your generous spirit and giving us the chance to engage with you and learn more about your practice in this project.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to work with all of you. And I love that it's like the water, you know, the pools of water, that it will touch more people. And I am very accessible. My email is even on the Jewish Museum site. Please email me and set up a time for you to come with your group.
Beautiful. And just to respond to Bonnie Mark's comment in the chat, the recording will be made available on all of our organization's websites in the coming days or weeks. So stay tuned for that. Portland Textile Month is continuing to put on programming for the rest of the month of October. Please go to our website, textilex.org, and you can learn more about our events that are coming up. We have free virtual events that are going on throughout the entire month, as well as in-person exhibitions and events. Rachel, do you want to talk about your group?
Sure, yeah, this was wonderful. Thanks again for this beautiful partnership. And Bonnie, just have loved to learn about your artistic process along the way. So grateful for that. And yes, we here in the Denver Jewish Community Center are hosting our Jewish Authors, Artists, Music, and Movies Festival as we speak. This is part of it, of course. And it's a hybrid festival, so you can check out our website. We have some fun virtual events. Jackie Tone from Glow is going to be performing, as well as Colin McCann, wonderful author and speaker. So check that out in the chat. And again, super happy to be here with all of you and to be making the water pool connections.
Great. Well, with that, is there anything else? Judy, do you have anything else you'd like to say, or Bonnie, or should we just close this on out?
Thank you all. And please, if you come, introduce yourself to me. And I'm so happy we can do this in other places.